welcome to a new episode of Real Spooky Stories, place where I tell your real spooky stories. If you'd like to share your story, give me an email on realspookystoriespodcast@gmail.com, or you can get in touch on any of the social media that is linked below. Also, if there's any topics or anything you want me to talk about or you don't want me to talk about, let me know below, or you can comment on whatever you're listening on too. So you have joined us for a fantastic episode. It is a Halloween episode. I know we're in April, but it's halfway to Halloween. This whole month has been halfway to Halloween month, and I'm here for it. I'm so here for it. And I love Halloween. It gets like around this time of year, like April, May time, where I really start craving the autumn and Halloween vibe of just pumpkins, autumn colours, orange everywhere, dark nights, little tea lights everywhere, cute ambience, and just love it. I just love it, and I'm craving it. And I thought, you know what, it is halfway to Halloween, so why not? So get your Halloween ambience on in the background, get a hot chocolate, get a pumpkin spice latte, get whatever the hell you want to get, because it's Halloween, alright, for the next however long this episode is. It's Halloween, alright? You don't have to be ashamed. We're in a Halloween world. We're in a Halloween life. No, alright, so I have got some stories here. So what I'm going to do is, I did say on last week's episode that I was going to do some real and creepypasta ones. I'm just going to stick with creepypasta ones this time, because I'm going to save the real people's Halloween stories until Halloween. I've already got a plan for Halloween, so don't you worry about that. I'm already ahead. I'm already thinking of things that I want to do in Halloween. Not podcast related and not podcast related. You know what I mean? Sorry, I'm just getting excited because it's exciting time. Also, let me just say about this Halloween ambience, what I said, get it on in the background. Just literally type in on YouTube, Halloween ambience. There's loads of different ones. It's so cute. Some of them have got like rain sounds, outdoor sounds, spooky music. I like to put it on in the background when I'm editing my podcast because it just gets me in the vibe. Obviously, I can't have it on now because you'll hear it, but it is on. It's just not the sound. So it just gets you in the vibe. If you're feeling that kind of vibe and you're doing something, just put one on. There's loads of different ones you can get as well, and there's loads of ambiences, but obviously Halloween's my favourite. You can also get like a Halloween fireplace, or you know, so just do it, alright? Anyway, sorry. So yeah, these ones this week are going to be creepypasta ones, but that means I know we're on Real Spooky Stories, that means they're not real, and I'm sorry about that. We haven't done a creepypasta special yet either, which I think is actually going to be next week. So they're not going to be real either. But then, don't worry, we'll go back to real stories. Don't you worry. And I've actually got some listener ones too. Okay, anyway. These are all from Creepypasta. They are all linked below, as always. And yeah, if you want to read them, you can click below. So here is one from Creepypasta subreddit. It is by the user Philosophy Subboy. It's titled, My Parents Disappear Every Halloween. I don't mean they'd leave for a party or night out. No, they'd vanish, gone without a trace by sunset, leaving me alone in the house. I'd search for them, call their names, but they were always gone, like they'd never existed. It wasn't something we'd ever talked about. The next morning, they'd be back, acting as if nothing had happened, like it was just another night. But it wasn't. I knew that. I learned that the hard way. It all started when I was 6 years old. I remember that first Halloween like it was yesterday. I was dressed as a witch, excited to go trick-or-treating, but just as the sun dipped down below the horizon, I noticed the house felt different. Cold, quiet, too quiet. I ran through the halls, calling for my mum and dad, but no one answered. Panic set in. I thought maybe they were hiding, playing a prank, but after what felt like hours of searching, I realised that they were gone. The front door was locked, the windows were shut, and I was completely alone. That's when I found the first note. It was on the kitchen table, written in my mum's familiar handwriting. It simply said, Rule 1, stay in your room, do not come out until sunrise. Whatever you hear, ignore it. I didn't understand it then. I was scared, confused and alone. I didn't want to stay in my room. I wanted to find my parents. But something about the note made me follow the instructions. I took a flashlight and a pillow, locked myself in my room and crawled under the covers. I thought maybe it was some kind of weird game. I wasn't sure. That night, I didn't sleep much. The house creaked and groaned, more than usual. I heard strange noises, soft scratching at my door, footsteps in the hallway, whispers that I couldn't quite make out. I told myself it was the wind or my imagination, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Something was in the house with me. The next morning, when I opened my door, my parents were back. They were sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. I asked them where they'd gone, what had happened, but they just smiled and said it must have had a bad dream. That was the beginning. Every Halloween after that was the same. My parents would disappear just before nightfall, leaving me alone with a note. Each year, the instructions got a little more specific, a little more ominous. But by the time I was 8, the notes included things like, Rule 2, don't look out the windows, and Rule 3, don't respond if someone calls your name. And the noises, they got worse. One year, when I was 9, the sounds outside my room became unbearable. There were knocks on the door, not gentle, but loud, insistent pounding. I pressed my hands over my ears, squeezing my eyes shut, but I couldn't block it out. The voice on the other side was familiar, my mother's voice calling my name. Ellie, it's okay, you can come out now. She sounded so calm, so normal. For a second, I almost believed it was really her. But the rule had been clear, do not open the door, no matter what you hear. So I didn't. I stayed under the covers, trembling, until the knocking stopped. I never told my parents about the voice, and they never asked. The years passed, and the game continued. It became a twisted Halloween tradition. While other kids dressed up and collected candy, I stayed locked in my room, listening to the house come alive with things I couldn't see. I became used to the notes, the strange noises, and the feeling of being watched. It was all part of the game, my own haunted ritual. But when I turned 13, everything changed. That year, the note was different. I found it on my bed just as the sun was setting, but instead of the usual instructions, it said, Rule 4, there's something new in the house tonight. Be careful. I didn't know what that meant, but the moment I read it, I felt a chill run down my spine. Something new? What did that mean? I locked my door, as usual, and tried to settle in for the night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The noises started earlier than usual. At first, it was the familiar creaks and footsteps. I had gotten used to those, but then there was something else. Breathing. I could hear it, low and heavy, just outside my door. It wasn't human. It was too slow, too deep. I pressed myself against the headboard, clutching my flashlight like a weapon, even though I knew it wouldn't help. The breathing moved away for a while, but then came the scratching. It wasn't at my door this time, it was coming from inside my room. I whipped the flashlight around, scanning the walls, the ceiling, but there was nothing. The scratching grew louder, closer, until it felt like it was coming from beneath my bed. My heart pounded in my chest, my throat dry with fear. I didn't dare look under the bed. I was too scared of what I might find. The scratching stopped abruptly, replaced by a soft, childlike giggle. The sound of it froze the blood in my veins. It wasn't me. It wasn't my parents. Something was in the room with me. I backed up against the wall, holding the flashlight out in front of me, like it could protect me from whatever was there. The giggling continued, soft and mocking. I whispered to myself, it's not real, it's just a game. But I didn't believe it anymore. Suddenly, there was a loud bang at the door. The whole room seemed to shake with the force of it. I dropped the flashlight, plunging myself into darkness. The breathing was back, but this time it was right outside my door. Bang! Another hit, the door shuddered. Bang! The lock rattled, whatever was out there was trying to get in. I scrambled to pick up the flashlight, but my hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold it. The banging grew more violent, each hit sounding like the door was about to give in. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Silence, pure, deafening silence. I held my breath, waiting, listening for any sign of movement. Then the voice returned, soft and sweet, like honey. Ellie, it's okay, you can come out now. It was my mother's voice again, but this time I knew it wasn't her. I didn't answer, I didn't move, I just sat there, frozen in fear, praying for the night to end. The voice called out again, more insistent this time. Ellie, don't be scared, it's just a game. My hands were trembling, and I could barely hold on to the flashlight. The voice kept calling, but I stayed silent. I knew the rules, I knew I couldn't open the door. But then, something strange happened. The door, it began to unlock. I heard the soft click of the lock turning, and the handle slowly twisted. No, I whispered, pressing myself further against the wall, willing the door to stay shut, but it was too late. The door creaked open, just a crack, but enough for me to see a shadow in the hallway. Something tall and thin, its limbs too long, its fingers clawed. It wasn't my mother. The creature stood in the doorway, unmoving, watching me. I could feel its eyes on me, even though I couldn't see its face. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt like I might pass out. And then, just as it stepped forward, the first rays of sunlight crept through the window. The creature recoiled, hissing like an animal, and within seconds it was gone. The door slammed shut and the house was quiet again. I didn't leave my room until the sun was fully up. When I finally opened the door, the house was just as it had been the night before. Silent, empty, as if nothing happened. My parents were back, sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee like they always did. I stumbled in, shaken and pale, and told them everything. The creature, the scratching, the voice that wasn't my mother's. They just looked at me, exchanged glances, and then my dad laughed softly. "You must have had a bad dream," he said, shaking his head. "Nothing like that happened, Ellie. It was just your imagination." My mum smiled that same strange smile and added, "You're safe now. It's over." But I knew better. I knew it wasn't just a dream. The fear, the things I'd heard and seen, they were real. They had to be. My parents didn't believe me. They never did, and that was the most terrifying part. Now as an adult with children of my own, I knew the truth. Whatever haunted me in the house, whatever played that sick game, is still out there, waiting, and it's hungry. I fear for the lives of my children. I'll never let them go through what I went through. I'll protect them at all costs, even if it means never celebrating Halloween, never letting the night touch them the way it touched me. Because I know, deep down, that it's only a matter of time before the game starts again. Halloween is coming. Ooh, that one was spooky. I don't really understand it though. Like, why did the parents disappear? And then, like, other stuff came. It's like, and did the parents know what was going on? Like, do you know what I mean? This next one is from Creepypasta as well. It is by the user Erutius and it is titled The Longest Halloween. Ready to go trick-or-treating, sweetie? Matthew was standing on the front porch, looking up at his mother through the eye holes of my homemade goat costume. Goat costume? I just said goat costume, sorry, it says ghost. Ready to go trick-or-treating, sweetie? Matthew was standing on the front porch, looking up at his mother through the eye holes of my homemade ghost costume. Mum, I don't feel good. Maybe I won't go out tonight. His mum looked down at him, smiling in that strange way he had become accustomed to. It was definitely supposed to be his mum, her red hair falling softly around her shoulders, as she wore her thrift store bridal gown she had ripped up for her zombie bride costume. But Matthew knew it wasn't her. When she turned her head, he could hear the tendons creak in her neck, and her richness of a smile made the corners of her mouth turn up painfully. "Come on, honey, Halloween only comes once a year." Matthew sighed. If only that were the case. They stepped off the front porch, making their way in the throng of children that happily capered about the cul-de-sac. His ghost costume looked a little plain when compared to others, but Matthew couldn't find it in himself to be self-conscious anymore. They weren't kids, at any rate, not the kids he'd grown up with. Behind their colourful masks or face paint or oddly yellow eyelids were black and soulless eyes. "I can't," Matthew said, letting his hand slip from his mother's. "Can't what, sweetie?" she asked, turning her painful smile on him. "I can't do this anymore," he yelled, throwing his bucket down and rounding on her. The throngs of trick-or-treaters turned to stare at him, and Matthew suddenly realised his mistake, not for the first time and not for the last. "Sweetie," his mother said, turning slowly, her arms and legs like something full of coat hangers and newspaper. "It's Halloween. You either treat or you get tricked." The kids began to circle around him, their voices low and their eyes shining like pools of tar. "Trick or treat, trick or treat, trick or treat, trick or treat." Matthew could feel his heart beating in his ears. It was noisy, soupy and constantly pounding, fundamentally different from a normal heartbeat in every way. He bumped into teenage Michael Myers, and the big mute pushed him over before he could properly get his bearings. He fell down hard on his chest, and then they were on him. Luckily, as Matt lay face down on the concrete, he didn't have to watch this time. They ripped his back apart, their sharp little teeth digging into his flesh. He felt the warm blood oozing down his back, the asphalt drinking it up as the kids tore him apart. His arms separated with a sickening pop, his sheet tearing as it ripped, and as Matthew lost consciousness, he hoped that maybe this would be the time it would end. He was so tired of being a ghost, tired of Halloween, and as the bright lights made him squint, he felt hot tears join his blood on the pavement. "Ready to go trick-or-treating, sweetie?" Matthew looked up at his mother, nodding as she reached and took her hand for the 1000th time. It didn't feel like a real hand, not anymore. It felt mushy in the wrong places, hard and unmoving in others, like a palsied claw after a loved one had a stroke. She looked down at him, smiling like a corpse, and Matthew tried to ignore the fact that the skin around her ears was darker than it had been the last time. His mother appeared to be rotting before his eyes, but to make note of it might bring on something worse. He walked once more into the sea of children, watching them run and cheer, but feeling their eyes as they tracked him. The whole street was like living in a forest of lions. Any minute they might spring from concealment and tear you to pieces. He had been here long enough to know, however, that as long as you played along with this everlasting Halloween, it was content to keep you in its clutches. As they came to the first house, Matthew could see old Mr. Debro as he smiled and stepped through his door. The liver spots on his head were starting to look more like mould, but Matthew tried to ignore it as he shook his bag half-heartedly. The old man would drop 2 small Kit Kats in there and tell him to have a great evening, just like he did every time, and Matthew wanted to get on with his charade. When the candy didn't fall into the bag like it always did, Matt looked up and saw the grinning face of the old man as it loomed over him. "Forgot your manners, son?" Matthew gasped. He'd become complacent again. He'd been here long enough to know that you didn't get candy unless you said the magic words, but he was so tired. He'd been trick-or-treating for ages and he was exhausted. Every time he finished, every time he came to the end, good or bad, it would all just begin again, and he was starting to feel like if he looked at his own reflection, he might be the one who was beginning to rot. He tried to stammer out a hurried trick-or-treat, but he could already see the long, sharp legs as they protrude from the corners of the man's mouth, whatever horrors that lay inside these things, already dragging itself free. The words came from what sounded like a drowned man's throat, or the dying voice of someone who's slowly choking to death, and Matthew heard it just as the pinchers of the horrific whatever it was shot out between Mr. Debreu's stained false teeth and latched onto his head. The teeth clicked together as they hit the ground, like a set of sad castanets, but Matthew heard his words as he faded once more to black. "You'll have to keep it in mind for next time." "Ready to go trick-or-treating, sweetie?" Matthew didn't even look up at her this time. He lifted his hand and grabbed hold of her with a paw as he let her lead him into the cul-de-sac. He moved on autopilot, remembering only the words that must be said as he came to each house. The candy filled the bag, the grown-ups continued to smile their hollow grins, and all the while Matthew trudged onward. He saw the corner coming up, the junction of Marla and Casterly, and Matt saw someone that made him cold inside. The man was dressed as Indiana Jones, bullwhip hanging jauntily off his waist, and when he turned to wave at someone who called his name, Matthew steered his mother towards a different house back down the road. "We missed the Jaffeth's house, Mum. Mrs. Jaffeth wanted to see your costume, remember?" His mother looked unsure, but she turned anyway, smiling as she allowed herself to be led away. "All right, Matty, no need to talk." Matt looked back as they left, seeing the man and knowing that he didn't want his mother to talk to him. She had talked to him once before, hadn't she? She had talked to him and something had happened, but it didn't seem like something that happened in here. He didn't know and he couldn't say, but when he saw him, the earth-shattering heartbeat that came on again, and he knew that letting her talk to him would be the scariest thing he had ever experienced. As the night went on, Matthew had held hope that the lights might start going off and he might be allowed to sleep. The bag was heavy, the pillowcase bulging oddly as it threatened to split, but still he and his mother walked the streets of the cul-de-sac. How many times had he done this? Matt wondered. 100, 200, 1,000? It felt like an eternity, and his sore feet slapped the pavement and his trainers threatened to fall to pieces. "Do you remember the first time, Mum?" he asked, suddenly repositioning the bag to rub his eyes. "Your first Halloween?" she asked, looking down at him with that fish hook grin. "I sure do. You were so cute in your cow costume. You said ooh instead of moo, and the neighbours laughed and said how adorable you were." "No," Matthew said. "I mean the first time we did this." "Look over there," she said suddenly. "The Holsteins are waving. Let's go see what they have." Matthew nodded, following behind her as she led him over like a cow to slaughter. Matt remembered the first time, remembered it well. He had looked up in his mother's eyes, being so excited. He had run down the street, tugging her along as they went house to house. That had been the first time he had seen the man on the corner, and the first time he had steered her away from him, not understanding why. He had laughed when the pillowcase ripped open, spilling his candy on the road, and when his mother had pulled another one out of nowhere, and he started filling that one too. The moon had been full, a big old round Halloween moon, and Matthew revelled in the light of that buttery orb. It had taken him a while to get tired, but he had finally asked Mum if they could go home so they could rest. She had tried to dissuade him, telling him that they should go to a few more houses. A little while later, when he asked again, she had tried to push him on, but he had stopped. "I'm tired, Mama. I'm ready to go home." She had turned then, and that was the first time he had noticed a smile. Her smile, that sharp, painful grin, had seemed sad as it looked at him, and he had known that there was something off then. This wasn't what he wanted. This hadn't been what he wanted. He just wanted a Halloween that would. He swallowed, true fear creeping into him as he looked at her unnatural smile, and noticed that the children had stopped moving around them. He had just wanted a Halloween that would last forever. "Oh, sweetie, you either get the treats or you get tricks." That was when he had seen them for what they truly were. They had circled around him, chanting trick or treat. As they swarmed in on him, they had torn him apart with their bare hands. All the joy had melted off his face as their nails and teeth dug into him, and when he had woken up on the front porch, his mother asking if he was ready, he had known that something was amiss. "Matty?" Matthew looked up, seeing that Mrs. Holstein had asked him a question. "Sorry, ma'am, what were you saying?" "I asked if you were a scaredy ghost or not." She was smiling, but it was like Matt could see the bugs crawling under the skin. It made him think that each of them had some kind of centipede or spider beneath their surface, just waiting to leap out. All of them seemed to have something in them, just below the surface, and Matthew was no longer certain he wanted to know what it was. It was hungry, whatever it was, and it seemed to enjoy making him suffer for his slip-ups. "Yes, ma'am, he yawned, feeling wobbly as the candy sack tried to anchor him to the earth. A scary, scary go. He then fell, not for the first time either. He hit the ground, his mother asking him to get back up, but he was just too tired. Matthew closed his eyes, hoping he would pass out, but it never happened. He could feel the adults looming around him, hear the chant of trick or treat, and when something slammed against his chest, he felt the breath whoosh out of him as it pierced his heart. He hoped it would be over this time, hoped to be allowed to die or wake up or whatever this was, but as he heard his mother's voice, he knew it wouldn't happen. "Ready to go trick-or-treating, sweetie?" His tired eyes came open, but as he reached for her hand, a thought occurred. "I forgot something inside. I'll be right back." He took a step for the door, but her hand clutched at him, just as it had the last time he had tried this. "It'll be okay. We can get it later. Come on, let's." But then he shoved her, and that seemed to take her by surprise. He ran inside, shutting the door on her as she got back to her feet. As he turned the deadbolt, she started pounding Julie on the hardwood. "Now, Matty, you know how this works. You either get the treat or you get the tricks." He could already hear the muffled cries of trick or treat coming from behind the door, and he backed away slowly as he watched it buck and jerk in the frame. He wasn't strong enough to push the couch in front of the door, or even one of the recliners, but he did shove the end table in the hallway in their path before running upstairs, closing the door of the room behind him. He locked the door and squeezed himself into the corner as he threw the sheet he was still wearing across the room. He could hear loud thumping coming from downstairs, and he didn't think that the door would keep them out for long. He racked his brain, trying to figure out how to get out of this. He thought back across all those trick-or-treating trips, all the nights he had come before this, and his mind always went back to the man in the wide-brimmed hat. He was scared of him in a way that he wasn't any of the others. Not the bugs or the feral kids or anything he'd seen scared him as much as that man. Why, though? Why did he terrify him so much? Why did he fill him with dread like this? "I want you to meet someone." He covered his ears, but his mother's voice wasn't coming from the house. "He's kind of important to me, like you." He put his head between his knees and started to cry as the door broke loudly from downstairs and the words of the children wafted up to him. "I've been seeing him sometimes, after work or while you're at Grandma's for the weekend, and I think he might be..." But the rest of it droned down to a low growl as his brain hit the brakes on it. He tried to remember what his mother said, but he couldn't. His mind struggled with the memory, but as he tried to make it make sense, he heard them pounding on his bedroom door. They were pushing, threatening to break the door, and he killed into a ball as he tried to make their memories come back. Trick or treat, trick or treat, trick or treat, trick or treat. They came thundering into his room. As they found him, one thought broke the surface above all the others. He needed to see the man and face his fears. As they pummeled him to death, one word resonated in his brain and drove him to oblivion. No. "Ready to go trick-or-treating, sweetie?" The word still sounded in his brain, even after the last few times. Matthew had gone along with her for the last, however many times, to varying degrees of success. He always avoided the man, always turned her back onto the endless cul-de-sac of candy-laden houses, but it was always ended up the same. He forgot his manners, he went off script and tried to escape. He simply fell over out of exhaustion, and then they had him. He reached for her hand again, and as they walked, his brain tried to argue itself into sense. They needed to talk to the man at the end of the block. No. "Trick or treat," Matt droned, Mr. Debo smiling as the leg sat just inside his cheeks, a silent warning to be careful. "Come on, Mum, let's go to the Andersons," he said, stalling for time. "They're not going anywhere, honey," she said as he pulled her along, her lips looking chapped as she smiled and smiled. "He has to know something. We need to." "No." "Are you a scary ghost?" Mrs. Holstein asked, and Matt nodded as he told her he was, indeed, a scary ghost. "But if we just..." "No, no, 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 no!" Matt finally yelled, clutching his head as he fell to his knees in the road. He wanted his brain to shut up. He was tired. He was so tired. He just wanted to go to bed. He just wanted us all to end. That's when he noticed that they were all looking at him. Matt closed his eyes and oblivion came on not too much later. Well, not oblivion. Something more like purgatory. Ready to, but he shoved again and went running down the street. Ghost costume flapping as he jumped off the porch. The kids were after him in a second, but Matt didn't care. They would get him, one way or another, but he just needed a break from the constant tricking and treating. He was running up the street, the crowd behind him, and when he looked back, the children seemed to bulge with the scrabbling things as well. They were full of bugs, all full of hate, and Matthew needed a way to get beyond this. He turned back just in time to bump into someone, and as he fell down, he covered his head, expecting to be killed by the howling mob. When it didn't come, Matt looked up to see who he'd run into. "Need a hand up, little buddy?" It was the man in the Indiana Jones costume, and to Matthew, he looked like the closest thing to an angel he had ever seen. Matt took his hand, shaking a little as he looked behind him. The mob had stopped, watching the man in confusion. and as Matthew looked up through the eyes of this ghost costume, he became aware that this fellow looked different. He looked real, untouched by this place, and Matt wondered why he'd been afraid of him. "It's great to finally meet you, Matt. Your mother's told me all about you, and I've been looking forward to meeting you. I'm Derek, and I guess I'm your mum's..." But the words seemed to slow down, and the dread came back over Matthew. As the mob came back to screaming life, Matt realised why he'd been afraid of this guy. Matthew turned, wanting to run again, but he was blinded by a bright light as he put his hand up to stop them. As he fell into oblivion, Matthew came to terms with what he had to do, and he hoped he had still the strength to do it. He needed to face his fears, otherwise he'd be stuck here forever. "Ready to go trick-or-treating, sweetie?" He looked up into his mother's smiling face, the corners of her mouth red as they threatened to crack, and shook his head. "Not yet, we're missing someone." He reached up and took her hand. As they walked towards the thing he feared most, the kids parted for them. They watched him, chanting the infernal mantra, and it seemed that he had the eyes of the whole neighbourhood. As he walked towards the swollen moon, he felt it swivel in the sky, and the creatures too seemed to watch him as he made a beeline for the spot he had tried so hard to avoid. It wasn't easy. Each step felt like the first step towards the high dive at the pool or the roller coaster at the amusement park. He could see the man, his hat at a jaunty angle, and as they moved closer to him, all the people around them seemed to hold their breath. "Julia," Derek said, raising his hand and walking over. "And this must be Matthew. Good to meet you, buddy. I'm Derek." He put out a hand and Matt shook it heartily. "Matty, I want you to meet someone," his mother said. "He's kind of important, like you, and I've been seeing him sometimes, after work or while you're at Grandma's for the weekend. I think he might be someone you'll be seeing more in the future. Matthew, this is Derek. He's my boyfriend." Matthew told him he was pleased to meet him, and as he watched the two of them talking quietly, he expected that now things would go back to the way they were. This was it. This was one of those storybook moments that would turn everything back the way it was supposed to be. Matthew smiled as he watched her hand slip into his and felt like everything would be okay now. When the first person began to scream, he felt a little less sure than he had before. The mob of children had followed them, the adults standing out like sore thumbs amongst them, and many of them were pointing at him. That huge moon that he had thought of as an eye only moments before cracked like an egg and split into two pieces. It began to rain something down on them, something that didn't look entirely pleasant. They slapped against his ghost costume wetly, but as one fell across the eye hole, Matt saw that they were bugs. They looked like a cross between a centipede and a spider, and as he threw it away, the crowd began to surge towards him. Matt ran, the only thing he could think to do, and as his mother and Derek stood amongst the throng of chasers, they looked like rocks in a rushing river. He ran, his sore feet almost spilling him into the road more than once. He had been so sure that this would work, that this would free him, but now he wasn't sure what he was supposed to do. The creepy crawlies were biting him as they covered the outside of his costume, weighing him down and making him sore. As the mob closed in, their cries of trick or treat sounding like a war chant, Matt saw a bright light coming up fast. He put a hand up, shielding his eyes, but he didn't dare stop running. As the light bore down on him, he hoped he would wake up anywhere beside the front porch of his house. Heaven, hell, nothingness, whatever was coming up next, Matthew welcomed it with open arms. The cries of the mob were driven into blissful silence, only to be replaced by a harsh and rhythmic beeping. Matt opened his eyes, and hands shot up and slapped his ear, making his head ring. He could see a pristine hospital room with a beeping IV ball attached to one arm and the warm sun of mid-morning outside a big window. His mother was snoring softly as she lay across his feet, and as he moved, his legs having gone to sleep as she laid across him, she stared and looked up at him in surprise. "Oh my God, Matthew!" She wrapped him in a hug, his IVs making him feel pinched, but he was happy to have woken up somewhere different for a change. "Hey, Mom, what's going on?" She smoothed his hair, her eyes wet, looking as she tried to commit him to memory. "You got hit by a car, sweetie. You ran away while we were trick-or-treating after..." She opened her mouth like a fish, but shook it off. "It's not important. What's important is that you're awake." "Where's Derek?" The vision of the two of them standing stationary as the group of screaming children poured past them is still vivid in his mind. "He's been by a few times, wanted to make sure you were okay. I told him I might need to take a break though. I didn't mean to upset you when I told you. I know it was sudden. I should have eased you into it. I'm sorry, Matty," she said, half crying. "No, it's okay. I was just surprised. I shouldn't have run away. You should call him. Let him know that everything's okay." His mother looked shocked but happy. She had clearly been worried for a while, but she was happy that Matthew was awake again. She stood up, asking if he wanted something to drink, and Matt nodded in the affirmative. His throat was very dry, and it felt like a while since he had used it properly. It wasn't until the sun set and the night came on that Matthew became anxious again. His mother excused herself, saying she needed to get some food and maybe call Derek to tell him that Matthew was okay. She sat with him all day, watching cartoons and just kind of holding him, but it appeared that her lack of lunch was catching up with her. The hospital was quieter now, the night shift in full swing, but she still stopped before heading out the door. "You'll be okay for a few minutes, right? You look a little pale, like there's something on your mind." Matt assured her that he would be fine, but he was a little happier once she was out the door. As another yawn shot through him, Matthew thought again about how his body would make him sleep soon, and he thought of something he should have considered earlier that day. He hadn't noticed right away, but when he had brought his hand down from his ear, he had wiped something onto the sheet. He must have rolled it into the sheet somehow, because he hadn't thought of it until he put his hand against the spot while later. His mother had been in the bathroom, the door open so she could peek out at him to make sure he hadn't just disappeared, and when he unbound the sheet, he saw something far too familiar there, staining the sheet brown and red as it pressed against it. It was part of the things he had seen falling out of the moon. The head and pinches of that strange centipede spider thing. He had picked her up on a napkin and thrown her in the garbage before his mother could see her. But what did it mean? Did it mean that it had all been real? Matt didn't know what to think, but he found himself wondering something as he lay there feeling tired. When he went to sleep, would he wake back up in the real world, or would he fall back into that eternal Halloween? Matthew was afraid that he might find out soon enough. Oh, that was a long one. I'm sorry I didn't realise it was that long before I started reading it. That was a good one though. It was like Groundhog Day. And you sound like a clever guy if you figured out why you had to, like what you had to do to actually wake back up. And yeah, was it real? Like, oh my god, scary. Also, I quite like the idea, I did quite like the idea of every day being Halloween, but after the story, I'm not so sure now. Here's another one from the Creepypasta subreddit, and it is quite long as well. Just a little warning, I don't think it's as long as that one I've just read, but it is a bit long. It is titled Halloween Haunts. It was my first Halloween on Hanby Street, and I was raring to go. I had just moved to the neighbourhood the week before, and I was hoping to meet some of the kids on the street as I filled my bag with treats. Mum hadn't set out to move this close to Halloween, but when your dad decides he needs the house for his mistress and her kids, you have to pick up and go pretty quickly. The court had made him buy Mum out of half the house, but that wasn't too difficult for him. We had found a very nice house on Hanbury Street, a street packed with families and little cracker box houses, but unpacking hadn't left me a lot of time to make friends. Now, standing on the front stoop in my homemade ghost costume, I was ready to find some friends. The costume had been last minute, my mum had honestly forgotten about it in the move, and when I had reminded her an hour ago, she had realised there was no time to buy one. Hunting around, she found some old sheets and cut a couple of eye holes in one to make a classic ghost costume. It looked kind of lame next to the superheroes and cartoon characters that were tromping up and down the street, but I liked it. It reminded me of Charlie Brown from the storybook I had in my bookcase, and as I set out, I wondered if someone might actually give me a rock. I didn't get a rock, but I did get lots of looks from those around me. I'd expected some laughs, maybe some questions about why I didn't have a real costume, but what I got was something between fear and scorn. People stepped out of my way, the adults looked down at me with disbelief, and a lot of the kids looked scared. I had to look at the front of the sheet a couple of times to make sure they weren't stained or something. No one wanted to talk to me, most of the children turned away from me, and the people at the houses refused to give me candy. They slammed the door in my face almost immediately, some of them telling me that I should be ashamed of myself before doing it. That's how I came to be sitting on the sidewalk, trying not to cry, and wondering why I had bothered to come out at all. I had met no one, I had made 0 friends, and I felt like I should have just gone home an hour ago. So when the group of other kids in ghost costumes walked down the street, they were pretty easy to spot. There were 5 of them, their ghost costumes looked dirty and ragged, and as they walked like a line of spooky ducklings, the crowd parted for them as well. They didn't stop at any of the houses, they didn't speak to anyone, they just kept making their way up the street like an arrow fired from a bow. I felt drawn to follow them for some reason, and to this day, I can't say why. Maybe I felt some kind of kinship, maybe it was the way people treated them, but regardless, I got up and ran to catch them, my shoes slapping on the concrete as I went. The other kids watched me go with genuine concern, but I didn't much care. These kids seemed to have made the same mistake I had, and it seemed like I was better to be an outcast as a group than alone. "Hey, wait up," I called, the 5 ghosts utterly ignoring me as we went along. We walked in our now 6 ghost line, and I began attempting to make conversation with them. They looked to be about my age, or at least my height, and they all carried brightly coloured candy bags that were in the same sorry shape as their costumes. They were mud spattered and ripped in places, and the kid in front of me had shoes with a sole coming loose. His left sole slapped the pavement, going whap whap whap, and I wondered what sort of costumes these were. Were they some kind of zombie ghost or something? Next to my clean white sheet, they looked downright grimy, and I wondered why their parents had let them leave the house like this. "Where are we going?" I finally asked, all of them leaving my neighbourhood as we turned a corner and headed to a less crowded street. I promised my mum I wouldn't go too far, and I don't know the streets real well. They ignored me, but I wouldn't have long to wonder. I had seen the house before, Mum and I staring at it as we driven into town. It stood out, the grass long and the fence ragged, but the house was the centrepiece of the unkempt space. It had probably once been a very nice one-storey house, but it looked like someone had pelted it with eggs or dirt, or both, and the owner hadn't bothered to clean it off. The windows were boarded up, the shingles hung raggedly from the roof, and someone had spray-painted "Killer" across the garage door in red letters. It was impossible not to notice, and I realised too late that that was our destination. Are we trick-or-treating here? I don't even think anyone lives here. They didn't say anything, but I realised I was wrong a few minutes later. I could see a light peeking from a crack in one of the boarded-up windows, and as the ghost arrived on the sidewalk, it was suddenly covered by a shadow. The ghost did not approach the house. They didn't even come off the sidewalk. They just stood there, bags in hand, and stared at the house. The shadow moved away from the opening a few times, but it always came back in short order. It was a fitful thing, moving away only to come back quicker and quicker to check that the ghost was still there. I kept turning to look at them, asking what we were doing, and just receiving no answer. The ghost kids just stood and stared, boring into the house with their dark circle eyes, and I think that was when I really got a good look at them. Their sheets weren't just grimy, they were covered in muddy tracks. Some of the stains looked like they could be blood, but the worst was the bare stench of leg beneath the sheets. The skin on those legs was cut and bleeding, purple and bruised, and the arms were in a similar state of abuse. The eyes, though, the eyes were the worst. Looking out from the open holes were darkened eyes that were purple with rings. The kids looked like they had gone 10 rounds with a professional boxer, and the part that usually had colour was pitch black and unblinking. These kids weren't interested in candy, they were out for something else. I opened my mouth to ask them why they were just standing there, when the door suddenly opened and a man in dirty, sweat-stained clothes came weaving out. He wore sweatpants and a tank top, and his bare feet looked like he had bumped them enough times to break every toe on them. He was thin to the point of being skeletal, and the clothes hung off him like rags. I had worried at first that he might be drunk, weaving and pivoting across the yard, but the closer he got, the more I came to understand that he was stone sober. He wasn't stumbling, he was afraid, and it took everything he had to approach those ghost kids. "What do you want?" he stammered, his foot catching on something in the tall grass. "Why do you torment me?" The grass was so tall that you could hear the dry husks scrapping across his pants, but if it bothered him or the 5 other little ghosts, it never showed. Haven't I suffered enough? The town won't let me forget, my ex-wife won't let me forget, and now you return every Halloween to remind me of my mistake. Why? Just leave me alone. Haven't I suffered enough? He stumbled again, his foot catching hard this time, and when he bumped into me, he barely missed being knocked down. That's when he seemed to realise that I was something else. He looked at me in disbelief, but it quickly turned to rage. He lunged forward, grabbing me and shaking me as I tried to articulate something, anything that would make him stop. He was hurting me, my head snapping back and forth as he shook, and I couldn't make a sound as he tried to shake me to death. You aren't one of them. There were only 5 of them. There's always been 5 of them. Why are you here? Why are you tormenting me? Why are you... Something hit him in the face, and he fell back in the grass and clutched his cheek. Something wet and sticky rolled down his neck, and I had a moment of fear as I wondered if it might be his eye. It wasn't. I saw that when he pulled his hand away, but when the second one hit him, I saw it was an egg, as a third and fourth joined them. "Get off him, you killer. Haven't you killed enough kids already?" I turned to see 3 kids on the opposite sidewalk, a carton of eggs between their feet and hands, already throwing more. The man scuttled backward, shielding his face, as he went and disappeared into the grass, and more eggs came pelting in. I heard the crunch of old weeds that was followed by the slam of a door, and when I heard sneakers coming towards me, I put a hand up in case the eggs came flying my way. "You okay, kid?" I looked up to find a Power Ranger, the red one, extending a hand to help me up. That was Ryan, someone who would later become my best friend over the next few days. "Yeah," I said, accepting the hand up. I looked over where all the ghosts had been, but they were all gone. I suppose they had gotten what they'd come for. "Well, let me help you with that," he said, taking the sheet off and folding it a little as he draped it around me. After a few minutes of fussing with it, his friends coming over to help, he had made a halfway decent toque out of it. His friends, soon to be my friends too, Rob and Patrick, agreed that it looked a lot better. They were clashed with their Power Ranger costumes badly. "You're the kid that just moved in on Hamby, right?" Ryan asked. "I'm Ryan, this is Patrick, and Robert." "Just Rob," he insisted as he waved. They invited me to come with them, chucking another dozen or so eggs at the house that the man had scuttled back into. They didn't seem angry about it. They did it like it was an expected chore and almost seemed bored. They left the trash in the yard before picking up their bikes and walking back the way I'd come, towards the happy sounds of our active street. "Why did you guys egg his house anyway?" I asked, the 4 of us passing more kids on the way with eggs. "Did he do something to you?" I'd expected them to laugh or maybe act proud of what they had done, but they just shrugged. It was a look I sometimes saw on people who were voting or going about volunteer work, bored but certain of their actions, and it was something that was hard to make sense of at age 10. We egg his house every year, everyone does. No one likes Horace Jenkins, but especially not on Halloween. "Why?" I asked, still confused. "The same reason I bet no one gives you candy. No one wears ghost costumes, not after what he did." "But what did he do?" I asked, starting to get aggravated. Ryan turned to me like he was going to yell at me for being stupid, but seemed to remember I was new. "It was probably about 15 years ago, way before we were born. Horace Jenkins was the owner of some company, something that was doing well around here, but it didn't make people like him. Horace Jenkins, from what my dad says, was a mean man. He didn't treat people right, he was rude, he didn't support the community, but he was rich, so people let him stay. On Halloween night, about 15 years ago, he was coming home drunk from a party he'd been at with a rich friend of his, and he ran over 5 kids in ghost costumes. It was all over the news, people knew he did it, but he got some hotshot lawyer who got him out without jail time. They claimed the kids had been running across the road. They claimed Horace hadn't actually been drunk, and they cast a lot of doubt and made a lot of deals. At least that's what Dad said. Afterwards, Horace tried to pay the families off, but they wouldn't take the money. No one in town would take his money, no one would work for his company, and he lost all his money when his wife left him. She took his house, his cars, his kids, and he was left with that little house and not much else. The people here let him live in the house, but they let him know that we haven't forgotten. After the accident, it was considered kind of disrespectful to wear ghost costumes anymore. That's why no one does it. They didn't know you were the new kid on the block, they just thought you were being mean. Now you know better, eh, Caesar? Caesar became my nickname after that, and my makeshift toga got me a lot of candy before the streetlights went out. I spent some time afterwards trading candy with my new friends and promising to see them at school the next day. I still live in that town, some 20 years later, and it's still considered a tradition to go egg Horace Jenkins' house. He's still alive, an old codger of 79, and I've realised that the town keeps him around as a warning. Working for the bank, I have come to find out that Horace Jenkins has no money, no assets, not a penny to his name, but his taxes are paid, his power and water bills are paid, and food is left on his doorstep once a week to sustain him. It's nothing gourmet, the basics are good enough for him, but it keeps him alive and living in a house that is slowly rotting around him. Once a year, someone cuts the grass. Once a year, someone spray paints killer on the garage door. And once a year, we all throw eggs and door clods at his house to remind him that he tried to cheat his way out of 5 lives. The law may have exonerated him, but the town does not forget, and it does not forgive. Sometimes, while my friends and I throw our eggs at the sagging wreck, I think I see 4 little ghosts on the sidewalk, staring at the house of the man who murdered them. Sometimes, while I throw my eggs at this temple of hatred, I wish Horace Jenkins would live 1,000 years. Then I remember that the ghost kids will be waiting for him, and that brings me some comfort. Oh, that was really good. It also made me think, because you said it was 15 years ago, and you were, kids, and he, killed the kids, but he had his own kids. His own kids could, live in that house like that. His own kids could be, your mum. I mean, obviously your mum would know what happened, but, you know what I mean? You could be his grandson. One of his kids was your dad or something. And, what happened to his kids and his family, and where are they now? You know what I mean? And also, do you still egg his house when you're 30? Because that's a bit, let the kids trick-or-treat and do that, not adults. You know what I mean? Right, that was another long one, wasn't it? I didn't realise how long that was again. So, I have got 2 more stories. Obviously, they're all from Creepypasta. This next one is by the user Verlac_1. It is titled The Last Halloween. Halloween used to be our favourite night of the year, but as we got older, the magic wore off. The thrill of trick-or-treating was a thing of the past, and haunted houses didn't scare us like they used to. So, when Sam suggested we all meet at his place to reclaim Halloween last year, we mostly shrugged it off. We were 17, too old for all that, but hanging out sounded better than spending the night scrolling on our phones. The 4 of us, Sam, Maya, Eli and me, met up in Sam's basement. We tossed around the idea of watching a horror movie marathon, maybe telling some ghost stories, but then Maya, grinning with a nervous kind of excitement, pulled out something she'd been hiding in her backpack, an old, battered Ouija board. This wasn't the cheap plastic kind you get at the store. No, this was something ancient-looking, carved from dark wood, with letters and symbols scratched in by hand. "Where'd you get that?" I asked, eyeing it weirdly. Maya shrugged. "Antique shop near the edge of town. The owner tried to tell me not to buy it. He said it had a dark history or something," she said with a laugh. Sam chuckled. "Come on, we're not kids anymore. A board game's not going to scare us." We set the board down on the ground, and I felt like chills settle over me. The basement felt darker, colder, as though something had shifted the moment the board appeared. But not wanting to be the one who chickened out, I joined them around the table, placing my fingers on the heavy planchette. I could feel the weight of it, cold and strangely rough, pressing against my fingertips. Maya took a deep breath, her voice barely a whisper. "Is anyone here with us?" At first, nothing happened. We exchanged glances, half smiling, trying to shake off the creeping sense of dread. But then slowly the planchette began to move, dragging our fingers along with it. It spelled out Y-E-S. I tried to pull my hand away, but it felt stuck, as though something cold and visible was pressing it to the board. The room grew colder, and a sour, stale smell filled the air, something rotten and damp that made me want to gag. "What? Who are you?" I managed to stammer, my voice barely audible. The planchette moved again, spelling out Friend. The words seemed to mock us, each letter pressing into my mind, chilling me to the core. Eli tried to laugh it off, but his voice was shaky. "Just some prank. One of you guys is moving it," he muttered, though he looked as terrified as I felt. "What do you want?" Maya asked, her face pale, her fingers gripping the planchette so tightly her knuckles were white. "Play. The air felt like it was pressing in on us, like something unseen was squeezing the life out of the room. I could feel my heart pounding, each beat sending another wave of panic through me, but I couldn't pull away. And then, as though mocking us, the planchette spelled out one more word. Stay. I heard a faint noise, a low, almost animalistic growl coming from the dark corner of the basement. The shadows seemed to shift, stretching and twisting, and as I looked closer, I realised it wasn't just a shadow. It was something huge, slowly forming out of the darkness. The creature stepped into the candlelight, and I felt my stomach drop. It was towering, at least 8 feet tall, shrouded in a tattered hood or cloak that barely concealed its grotesque form. Beneath the hood, I could make out the twisted face of a ram, its horns spiralling out and curling around its head like a crown. The eyes were a deep, burning red, sunken into deep sockets, fixed on us with a hunger that made me want to run and never look back. The torso was disturbingly human, muscular and twisted, but from the waist down it had thick, furred legs of goat, ending in massive cloven hooves that clacked against the basement floor with every step. Its rancid breath filled the room, the stench so foul I thought I would be sick. It grinned, showing sharp, yellow teeth that looked like they could tear through bone. "Stay," it hissed, its voice in a low, guttural growl that seemed to reverberate through my bones, locking me in place. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't obey. The creature reached out, one massive clawed hand closing around Sam's neck, lifting him off the ground as if he weighed nothing. His face turned red, then purple. His eyes were wide with terror as he clawed at the creature's grip, his legs kicking uselessly. There was a sickening crack, and his body went limp. The creature dropped him to the floor, his lifeless eyes staring up at the ceiling. I felt Maya's hand tighten around mine, but she was frozen too. Her face twisted in horror as the creature turned its gaze to her. Its rancid breath washed over us, and it whispered, "Play," as the planchette also moved to spell the word. Before I could even think, it reached out, grabbing her by the arm and yanking her back to the darkness. Her scream echoed in the basement, a raw, desperate sound that was cut off too soon, and then she was gone. Eli and I moved, our fingers finally breaking free from the planchette. We bolted up the stairs, our footsteps pounding, our breaths coming in gasps. But just as Eli reached the door, he froze, his body twisting as if something had gripped him from behind. He let out a strangled scream, his face contorted in agony before he was pulled back down the stairs, disappearing into the darkness. I didn't stop. I tore through the door and into the night, running as fast as my legs would carry me. I didn't look back until I was miles away, collapsing on the sidewalk, my chest heaving, my mind reeling. I went to the police, tried to tell them what had happened, but they just stared at me, their expressions sceptical. They questioned me like I was lying or losing my mind, asking if I'd been drinking, if maybe I'd imagined it all. I could see it in their eyes, they didn't believe me. They never searched the house, never looked for Sam, Maya or Eli. Instead, they told me to go home, to get some rest, to let it go. But I can't let it go. I can't shake the feeling that the creature is still out there, waiting. This Halloween morning, I felt it watching me from the shadows, heard the faint clack of hooves on concrete, smelled that rancid breath that haunts my nightmares. I know it's only a matter of time. As I left my house this morning, on my front porch was the board. Except this time, there were dark, reddish-brown stains on the letter that spelled out each of my friends' names. As I sit here and write this at work, I can feel it behind me. I look down the hallway and see a shadow behind a corner. It's waiting for me. Ooh, that one was spooky. I was about to say it's not really Halloweeny. Also, the police never searched the house. Didn't the lad Sam die in the house? So his dead body's just in the house. And like, what about his family? You know what I mean? Aren't they going to be like, no, he's dead? Like in the basement? You know what I mean? Also, as I was reading this, I kept looking out the corner of my eye because it feels like there's something out the corner of my eye, but there isn't. It's just the way it's getting a bit dark now. The living room's dark. I keep looking because it looks like there's something there. But there's not. It's fine. We're all fine. We're all okay. We do not claim this energy. Right, well, I did have another story and I literally just read it all because I hadn't read it before I got it ready for this, if you know what I mean. I just read the whole story and it's like there should be another part to it and there's not. So I'm not going to include that one because it's just like, I don't understand. It's like it's the start of a story and they just haven't finished it or something. So I'm not going to include it anyway. But this episode's still like an hour long. So I think that's enough. I hope you enjoyed the Halloween creepypasta stories. I hope it's got us in a bit of a Halloween mood. I just like creepypasta stories because it gets us in the Halloween, like, it gets us in any vibe of whatever the story is. But they're just descriptive better, like the one of the ghost trick-or-treating and like the trick-or-treating through the streets and stuff. It just gives me like a nice feeling and like an American Halloween, like a classic old school Halloween of loads of kids out, decorated streets and everything on Halloween. It just makes me feel tingly inside. But anyway, yeah, hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Next week's episode, or maybe the one after, is actually going to just be a creepypasta special. So I've got some classic creepypastas on there for us to hear, including Smile Dog, which is my favourite. So if you haven't heard creepypastas, or you've got a little favourite one, it could be on there. It's one of the few classics on there. Anyway, but that might be 2 weeks' time, not 1 week, because I also need to do a psychic episode and I have a listener story on that one as well. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and we are halfway to Halloween. So just think about how like the feeling of Halloween and how long ago that was. We've got to do that again to get that feeling again. But as soon as it gets to like August, September, I'm in Halloween mood anyway. And yeah, it's just a vibe. It's like autumn vibe. It just starts. It starts in like August for me, I won't lie. And that's not that far. It's like 4 months. So it's fine. But I hope you enjoy Halloween. Hope you enjoy halfway to Halloween in April. It's Halloween. Sorry, I don't know how many times I've said Halloween. Go back to the start of this episode and take a shot every time I say the word Halloween. And you'll be drunk, and that's a fun drinking game for the summer. Halloween in summer, I love that. If you want to have a little Halloween in summer, you can carve a watermelon. I actually did that once and it looks cool, but it only lasts about a day and then it smells weird. Okay, anyway, thanks so much for listening to this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give a little like or comment or whatever you want. It all helps with the algorithm and gets this podcast out to other people. Also recommend this podcast to people if you like it and you know that they like that kind of thing or whatever. But thanks so much for listening, and I will see you next Sunday at 12 p.m. Goodbye.